Hi, and welcome back to another Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, I'm going to be discussing a bit of missions and all. The purpose of this is to kind of talk about just missions in general, strategies that I try to employ to do well at the mission. We're going to take a look at the winner of the mission contest, and we're going to take a look at the entry that I actually did as well for it, including I'll talk about the feedback I was given, changes I made, and changes I made later on after actually playing through this mission at a tournament. So, at this point, about 2 weeks ago, we had a tournament where we played. So we got, a good amount of games in with the winner mission, my mission, and then just a random rolled mission that I did. Normally what I do, since I play and run the tournaments, what I do is I make my list, things like that. Night before, I just randomly D10, D12, whatever amount of missions we're looking at for seeing what we end up playing. All right, so before we get into any of that, if you're looking to pick up anything for Conquest like that, we do have a discount code in the show notes below. Strain Kicker saves you 10%, helps us out as well. Other than that, we're going to get into this. And like I said, the hope is at the end, through a well-focused discussion or random meandering, which is kind of what usually happens a little bit more anyway. There's always a point to it, but sometimes it goes a little bit to the side from maybe what I want. But the hope of all of that is that maybe it gives you some thoughts about when you're putting your list together, all of that, and especially maybe a little more time of when you're sitting at the table and what do you do then in order to actually win the game. Also, hopefully my voice is coming out just fine. I took about the week or so off because start of the semester always ends up usually giving me a sore throat because I go from, not talking differently, but just talking a lot louder. Even for this, I still talk tons. I record tons of things or anything like that, but I don't essentially yell. On our campus, there's maybe two other people in the entire college that are louder than I am. So it always messes with me. But then it turned out, I guess it was a legitimate cold because then I was sick for about 3 or 4 days and I definitely couldn't record then. So hopefully everything sounds about right. If not, very shortly after this, I'll be back to hopefully entirely normal. All right, so what I want to start with is I want to begin with just making sure that everyone's comfortable with the rules of actually scoring. Now, this is where they are right now. Obviously, some things will change. Be aware if you are looking at this after some rules update, there might be some nuanced changes. I'll try to note those in show notes or something like that when those do come up, especially if they greatly change what happens. But otherwise, this should be accurate to quite a bit accurate. All right, so essentially when you're looking at the mission, keep in mind this is a 10-turn game. You can start scoring. We're going from tournament side things. So starting to score, say, turn 2 for all your different pieces, but you essentially have 9 turns in which to score. And you're essentially scoring from 2 particular things. You're either talking about objective zones or you're talking about objective markers. So those are the 2 things that you're doing. They recently had some clarifications, which to me, what they clarified seemed correct, or I don't want to use the word obvious because maybe you did have an issue with it, but they made the clarifications and ruled it the way that I think it made sense to rule it, which was nice. So for objective zones, I said starting turn 2, you can start grabbing those things. You are looking at having your most stands. Now, what they clarified, and this is the way I played it, maybe other people were unsure of this, to grab an objective, you need more stands and more scoring stands. You need to meet both criteria because lights naturally don't score. Now, if they do have a rule, and this is a change to the rules as of maybe 6 months ago, because the wording change now allowed for some of this, that if they get to have a rule that lets them count as extra for scoring, I'm thinking Wadroon, I'm thinking Nords, they can have their command stands count for 1 or so, that now those units actually can score. Or that particular stand can score, which makes the unit possible to score. Mediums, heavies count as 1, monsters count as 3. I said to score, you need more stands on the objective than your opponent and more scoring stands than they have for their scoring. So that does mean And you need to meet both criteria. So that does mean if I have 3 scoring stands, but you have 3 medium, or 3 lights, that doesn't do anything. I don't have more stands than you. I don't have more scoring stands than you. However, if I had, say, 3 stands of medium, 1 stand light, you had 3 stands of lights, I have more scoring, and I have more stands than you. Now it counts. So just keep in mind that we do have those 2 qualities that we have to be able to meet. Other than that, you stand on objective zone. At the end of the round, you score points from it, or whatever the mission says to do. If you are claiming it, you're claiming it if you meet those criteria, if you are seizing it, essentially. Big part is objective markers as well. And I know, at least from me, making them. Actually, I spent, what would have been Saturday. I have them over there. I can't quite see them from here. Making 4 Sorcerer King objective markers using my FDM printer, using the files that I purchased, the ones that Parallel Games did, which I will say there's a very upside and downside to their terrain. The upside is their terrain is actually very, very nice. Prints really well. I do tree supports, had no problem, ripped them all off. Worked perfect. Works really good for objective markers. Works really good for either garrisonable or impassable terrain types, all of that. What they don't necessarily have is more of area terrain type stuff. I'm not sure what they would really do, but I'd like to see, since there's other terrain types, that maybe they find a way to incorporate something that would fit maybe more of the area or terrain maybe that you don't necessarily can't touch kind of thing. Again, I don't know exactly what they would do for that, but say for us, okay, we're looking at forest stuff, maybe something that even if it's just one of them, say Nords, maybe Nords should have had, some trees, stuff like that. Okay, hey, this can count as my little forest or something. You can put it on something yourself. But otherwise, I have several of the terrain packs. Really been enjoying it and printing them now upstairs. Which I don't know what anyone tells you, but Bamboo A1s are actually louder than they say. It may be because of what it's on, but that thing rattles the table, but does a really good job. All right, so for the markers, starting turn 2, you can start destroying these bad boys. They are 3 health, 3 defense. They make it interesting of some of the things that happen. So you are allowed to charge them. You can clash them. You can do impacts against them. So you can fight them as if they were an enemy, assuming they're not a friendly stand. Stands are either friendly, neutral, or enemy. So if they're neutral or enemy, you can go at them, just as you would otherwise. If you want to shoot them, you got to be in effective range. So you got to be in the half range to actually be able to shoot them. Can't do anything to them before turn 2. Can never target them with spells. The only thing you can target, not necessarily the spell, or those sort of things, is if you have a rule that says you may target an objective. Like Sorcerer Kings have a ritual that goes after one. It is not technically a spell. Spells may never do it, but if you had something that calls it out, then you are allowed to. Has no resolve, so nothing that affects resolve matters to it whatsoever. Can't drive it insane or anything like that. They cannot take more than 1 wound from volley, spell. Now, again, you can't normally spell, but in case there was something like that, or that might just been something they didn't remove. Draw event special rules or other abilities. So if you're not in contact with it, you can't do more than 1 wound to it, whatever it is that you're trying. If you're not heavy, you can't do more than 1 wound to it with your impact or your clash. If you are heavy, you're allowed to do 2. They're always 3 wounds, and the wounds are tracked separately. So if it is a neutral, I'm trying to do 3 wounds to it. You're trying to do 3 wounds to it. Whoever gets the 3 first takes the thing out. Tend to be worth a decent amount of points, usually, or they allow you to score other things. You'll see in the mission that I developed as well, some of the other ones, they do that. But they're usually for a good chunk of points in an immediate fashion. I do find overall that taking out objective markers can often be the part that turns the tide, especially if the amount of objective zones is fairly equally well distributed. So if you have a mission that's like 2 and 2, and you have some objective markers there, what might happen is that we both kind of take our zones, or maybe I try to push off one and sooner or later you get it back. Those will stay very close, but the objective markers might tip that scale. A few things that they mentioned that are very important also to keep in mind with this: you can get within an inch, and you can move through these markers either way. So you're allowed to move through them, you just can't stop on them. Keep in mind you're allowed to march onto things and then march past them. However, what you're not allowed to do is march, be partially covering it, and then charge after that. Only marching has the indication in the rules that you can chain multiple marches together to be in a valid position. You're not allowed to march and then charge from an invalid position. Just keep that in mind. Otherwise, they talk about, if it's a friendly objective marker within an objective zone that is being contested and all, and whether or not you're actually allowed to take it, because there are some missions that you actually have objectives on there, whether or not you can actually grab them. So they do explain that a little bit as well. Also, I didn't mention their size 2, which comes into quite a bit of play, because they absolutely can get in the way and obstruct your vision. But importantly, when you charge the objective marker, since it counts as an enemy, a few things happen. One, if you're, say, touching an objective marker here, and I want to charge you, I'm allowed to cross that objective marker. By rule, and they FAQ'd this, by rule, yes, you are absolutely allowed to do that, because it counts as an enemy, but you don't take any damage by reforming, withdrawing, any of those sorts of things. So it's essentially an enemy that does nothing to you. The other important thing, because we actually got this wrong in our tournament, is that since it counts as you're engaged with an enemy unit, you're not allowed to volley, you can't charge while in contact with it. If you want to move away, you're withdrawing, because you do count as being engaged with this model. So you do have to still follow those certain rules. But that gives us a bit about objective markers and all. So we now know the 2 facets in order to actually score in this game. A useful trick I found with not so much objective zones, we'll talk maybe a little bit about things related to that, but for objective markers, is if I'm trying to protect a unit from being charged, if I put the marker in such a way where my opponent cannot get to me without having to end on that marker, then they're not allowed to charge me. Remember, you don't just shift away from things. They're allowed to go through it, but if you don't leave them space to actually be able to land, now they can't land. That can be really useful, especially on a unit that either maybe it's a marker that I can't destroy because it's friendly, or a marker where that's not my concern right now. Say if I'm talking about my Sorcerer Kings, I have a ritual that just one-shots them. Okay, so I don't necessarily want to go in and fight the thing. That's kind of a waste. But I could use it to hide a little, say, 3-pack unit, keep them from getting hit by something I really don't want to get smacked by, and then, when the timing is right, either take it out, or something always to keep in mind is, again, your opponent is trying to play the game as well. You can have the best plan imaginable. Your opponent also has a plan, and they're going to try to exert their will on you the same way you're trying to exert your own, which means that maybe I'm not ready to destroy the objective just because, with what they went in there, they went in with some heavy cav unit. They're probably going to one-shot it anyway. If I go and hit it, one, will I take it out? If no, what good am I doing? Or I take it out, I get a few points, but then my unit that I really kind of need to go on this objective zone or do something else for me is about to get obliterated because of just the timing. I go forward, destroy it, and then they hit me with this unit, I'm gone. So sometimes giving it up to the opponent, absolutely a valid strategy. But in the tournament, one particular thing I saw, again, talking about cav, I positioned one of my units, or really about 2 of them, in such a way where this large brick of cav couldn't get into me. This thing was going to be stopping them. However, because of some of those positions, I was able to potentially get into them, mostly just because of particular spots and things like that. You have to be careful of where you place yourself. And even that, if I couldn't quite get in, I do have ways in Sorcerer Kings to get 3 actions. I could kind of shift and then do it. So I had some ability to get the spots that might have been a little bit more finessed because of the size that my particular unit was. We're talking about a 3-pack of a free going against some Ashen Dawn. So you can use objective markers to your advantage. They're not only a way to gain points, but they could be a way to stymie or slow down your opponent, or to force them, they're going to go and sit and destroy that. They're not hitting it with a heavy unit. It's going to take a while. I'm now not concerned. Or it gives me that turn I need to get towards a flank to be able to hit them better. So we do have a bit of that in play here. For objective zones, you're now just trying to grab up the points and things like that. We'll talk about how to succeed at missions, which we'll talk a little bit more about dealing with objective zones. But one big strategy for that is, do you allow your opponent to get onto the zone at all? So if it's a zone, say, closer to your backfield, Do you push right to the edge? What a lot of people do, and what I try to do when possible, depending on the unit, in other words, can they survive the hit, is you put them right to the front. However, you can put them to the front, but now they are potentially 6 or maybe even 12 inches closer to the enemy, or 9, depending on position, which means that if they can't really take the hit nearly as good, now they're going to get hit instead. So those sort of thoughts, but we'll get into a little bit of that. When we take a look at the various missions that they have, just to discuss the overall viewpoint, and then we'll get into a little bit more of this. A few things related to scoring or to playing these in general. One thing I like to keep in mind, and we'll go to succeeding at them in a moment. One big thought I like to keep in mind is that this is a 10-turn game. I don't care who wins turn 2. I don't care who wins turn 3 and all of that. That doesn't mean that things can't be starting to go bad for you early, of course, or things are going really well for you early, of course. But you didn't win the game in turn 2. You didn't win the game in turn 3. Realistically, turn 5 and 6 is maybe where I feel that you can start to truly win the game. And even then, stuff can swing back. I've had games where, I'm losing and we get into turn 8 and I'm like, wait, oh no, here's my path to victory. For whatever reason, I end up pulling it back. That absolutely can happen, of course. And yeah, not so much in this because you start with stuff off the board, but if you think of like 40k, you can win 40k in turn 1. And I don't necessarily mean old leaf blower lists where your opponent doesn't have anything left. I mean, I hit you so hard or in such a way that you really can't fight back. But since we don't start with stuff on the board, you can be ill-positioned or behind the 8 ball potentially early, but you really shouldn't have lost by that point. When we look through the missions, we notice a few different things. One, there's a wide variety of how many objective markers or zones you have. Say Divide and Conquer, the first one here, you're looking at 6 and 2. Now, they're all the small zones, but notice you have some in 12 inches. Most units then. So if that's 12 inches, it's a 6-inch bubble. You're talking about 9 inches up then. 9 inches, a double march from something coming in can be sitting on that then. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a unit that couldn't do that. Which means turn 2, I could be sitting on 2 of those objective zones automatically, getting points from that. You could easily be doing the same. So what are we really fighting for? We're fighting for the middle. Or I'm trying to push past and go over to here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. No, it's just the 2 objective the 2 objective markers. And obviously in some of these missions, the one closer to you can get or not. We have ones like the Inclined Flank, where now they're a little bit further. They're still likely that I get 3, likely that you have these 3, but now we're closer to each other. We're more likely to be fighting it out over these. We also have missions, just to kind of get to them, that have a lot of markers or very few zones. So we'll get into succeeding at missions in a second because I think this plays into it quite a bit. Or, like I said, this one, Off Balance. Off Balance I really, really like. So let's actually get to succeeding at missions because it's hard to say the rest of it without getting into this list that I have. So I have 5 bullet points. I wanted to keep that part pretty short because I don't want it to do a thing where we just go through, look at a mission, and talk about how to win at that mission. If that's what people actually want, that can be done, but I assume that would be would it be what people want? I don't know. I know at least when I paint, actually lately, when painting, I've been watching Deadliest Catch. I watched 8 seasons in the last, week and a half or so, because I've been painting for a lot of time. And I just slap it on whenever I'm painting. Or some other stuff I'm sitting in my office and all. But that's what I've been doing. How about you? I used to watch The Office a lot. But after about 6 or 7 watch-throughs, I need something else. Don't get me wrong. The show is still good. But the cringe part to it has started to get to me. As I've gotten a bit older, I struggle with it more than I used to. So. All right, let's talk about succeeding at missions, and that will get into some of the things we've mentioned here. So, first, most important thing to think about is how much scoring is actually possible. What you will notice, some of these missions vary greatly in the amount of points that you can honestly score. When we were playing that tournament, and we'll look at the winning mission from that submission, one of our players got 90-some points on it. Where there's other missions, a little bit less in the tournament one, but in general, there's other missions where you're getting nowhere near that. Actually, I think the third mission we played that day, Maelstrom, highlights this really well. Take a look at Maelstrom. Depending on the round, you're either getting 2 points for the little or 1 point for the big or vice versa. And you're not even getting extra points for having more. You're not getting points for the most destruction or anything like that. So that means theoretically, if everything goes perfect for you, you're scoring 5 points a turn. That means 45 is your max score for this particular mission. If everything went perfect, and it's not going to. Your opponent's going to be on objective at some point. They're going to stop you to some level, or at least contest you, even if they don't take anything themselves. But your maximum score here is 45. So that's the best you're going to get. Actually, I think it might have been melee is what we did. If we compare that just to melee here. All right. 2 points for the little ones, 3 points for the big. 2 more points if you got 2 or more of them. 2 points for warlords, 2 points for enemy characters, 2 points for regiments. If we save the destruction till the end, because we always do, I would just find it easier to do it that way. But we save the destruction to the end, there's 10 points available every round here. That's potentially, 12 points, because then you would have 2 or more. So it could be max of 12. Are you going to get all 12 early? No, I would be really surprised. But I've had late games where maybe I was down big, but especially in this one, it's turn 8. You really don't have anything left because over time I was able to whittle you down. I can now score 12 points for those last several turns. Were you not up by 30 plus points? I can overtake you. And if I've done well and say that destruction, maybe that's enough as well. So how much can you actually score? How important is it to get points early or when you need that? And that's what we're going to get to in the next point in a second here. Be aware of what the maximum is and be aware of where your opponent is and what things they can do to stop that. In, say, melee, a mission like this, let's use this as our typical mission, discuss this. Okay, there could be up to 12 points engaged. So my goal is if I could grab, say, a 9 and a 6, the ones closer to my side. Let's assume I'm player 1. If I can grab these, then if you're on these, we're tying on points for the moment. Now my goal is to probably just try to push you off of even just a 6. Better if I can push you off that 9, but maybe I don't want to use that like refused flank idea or 1 unit coming here pushing when all the rest of my forces is down. But if I let you grab up 3 instead, now I'm going to start falling behind on points huge. Whereas when we looked at that other mission, even if you're getting everything, you're not really getting that much. I can wait you out. So knowing those sort of thoughts, what can you actually get out of this? If you're looking at ones with objective zones, a lot of times the objective zones are worth 3 to sometimes 4 points. In this one, they're worth 4 for destroying the enemy objectives. And notice the objective markers, I should say. Let me be clear. The objective markers. But the objective zone's only worth 2. 1 extra if you have both. So if I'm sitting on 1 and you're doing whatever you want, destroying one of your objective markers is worth 2 turns of you sitting on that objective, or doing that and, say, getting in the way of A, not letting you get to it. That's now a big swing in this one because there's a lot of focus on those markers instead of the zones. So being able to sit a unit somewhere is useful. In ones like this, these are the ones where I usually try to sit a little bit closer to the back. You want to contest me, I'm fine with that. I have a problem if you're taking it from me, but even then, I can take that for a turn or 2. I would rather take that than push forward, pushing, say, this way, and then you are now that much closer, can hit me, and you take down too much of my unit. So, how much can you score, and what ways, maybe I didn't put it there, what ways can you score? What ways do you need to score? Do you need to make sure that you are sitting on a bunch of objective zones? Do you need to really make sure that you are taking out these markers? Are you pushing forward to make sure you can get to the markers? And if they want to get to, say, your back marker, they're going through a lot of your force to get there. Do they have the tools to auto one-shot them? If we look at, say, 100 Kingdoms now, 100 Kingdoms have an Archangel. One form of the Archangel can one-shot an objective. It's sitting within 12 inches. Sorcerer Kings have their ways of doing it. Other factions do as well. We're far from the only ones. So how and what way do you need the score? Second thought, is what do you need and when do you need it? Now, that goes into what we've been saying here, this idea of how many points are available. Can I wait to get my points? Do I need to get points early? What sort of faction are they? So if we think, I tried to classify the factions in one of three ways. I thought of them as holders, people who are good at just sitting on the objective. They can take the punch, or the units that want to get the objectives are good at taking punches. Now, anyone can take a little 3-pack of whatever, say medium, to go grab something, or a 3-pack of lights to contest something. But that doesn't mean that little 3-pack of mediums is actually going to be able to stick. I'm thinking like Old Dominion. When I'm taking a little 3-pack, I'm thinking, say, Legionnaires. Because a little 3-pack of Legionnaires, especially if I have a Dark Cenotaph in there, pretty decent at sitting and grabbing an objective zone. But they're not going to be able to withstand you coming to take it. So they're good at scoring on it, but not really holding it. So we have holders, we have pushers. Pushers are the factions that are essentially going to be setting the line. They're the ones that are going to be coming at you. And if you're looking at one of these missions where, okay, things are more midline, am I going to get to it first or are you? And not necessarily are you even going to necessarily be scoring it. Maybe you are, but you're going to be on there and stopping me from getting it. Am I going to have to be trying to throw you off? And the other bit is the ones who try to take them, so the takers. So these are the factions that tend to have, or at least the way I think of their lists. Obviously, anyone can do anything. But the ones who want to rush in at some point, they have the biggest heavy units. Their big heavy units are really good at doing this. Maybe a lot of fast cav, those sort of pieces. So when I think of armies that I feel are good at holding in general, 100 Kingdoms I think are very good at that. They have, depending on the type of list that you run, if you're not running the pure cav list, if you're running the cav list, you are trying to take the objectives from people, let them get to the right spots, and then just blow them out with cav. But if you're taking a list that has some infantry, I'm thinking of theists, all that kind of stuff, or even just feudal or imperial, you can take big blocks of guys. You can put a good amount of upgrades, and I will say, I didn't do a video discussing the 100 Kingdoms rework. I do want to do that. I haven't done that yet. Their rework, I think, adds a lot of survivability to them. They have a lot of ways, either not only just to heal, but to be able to lower what the opponent does to them. So I think their survivability went up huge. City-states, obviously. You have big blocks of Phalangites and things like that you can do with. I think Spire Horde does well. Again, holders, not even necessarily that they're always necessarily scoring. I'm thinking, larger units of drones and stuff. But if I'm there with like 6 stands, you're not taking it with your 3 stands. And if my unit, say, has a Biomancer in there, and I'm careful about the way that I heal, and I can really push that, you can defeat a bunch of my models, and I'll bring them back, and you still won't have it, kind of thing. So those are the main. Now, other people can hold, depending on what you run, obviously. You can run, if I run a Fallen Divinity, she's great at holding whatever I want her to do. Wherever she's sitting, it's probably hers. You probably don't want to go challenge that. But I'm thinking about large archetypes. I'm not talking about individual lists. We can get into a little bit more list nuance to that. For factions that push, Nords absolutely push. Nords can get scoring lights, scoring command stand lights. Nords have a lot of Vanguard, a lot of 6 moves, a lot of speed, and good lights. So, like, personally, in the last few games that I've done, I haven't really been taking lights. I might change that if only just to get some more reinforcement line, but I haven't really been doing it. But Nords, they'll take some lights. They'll take lights. By the time you start bringing your stuff on, they're sitting on these 9s. Maybe they're grabbing them, maybe they're not. In a lot of ways they can. But even if they weren't, they're stopping you from getting it. So they'll get some points, and then they're going to keep you from it. They're very good at getting early points, where usually they want to go ahead on that point track very early. You'll claw back, and they hope to hold you out long enough that you either don't have enough units to claw back out enough points, or just run out of time. If you're down by 40 points and you only score 5 points a turn, you're out of it, kind of thing. Other ones I would say is Wadroon. Wadroon, especially Raptor Rider type Wadroon. So Wadroon, Wadrun, I think, can fit, all these can fit up variety styles, but Wadrun can really fit this if you're taking more of those lights, especially Raptor Riders. Raptor Riders are very, very good. They're very good at getting that maneuverability, to getting, opportunist type pieces onto people, getting a little bit of shooting, getting into people. Even if they're not taking the objectives, they're stopping someone from doing it. And that can be just as good sometimes. And with, I want to say their evasion too, means they actually have a decent amount of survivability for that, especially in the early game, because you're not getting hit at that moment with necessarily the tons of attack things. For ones that are good, again, other things can push as well, but those are the two spots I think that really fit that. For people who are going to take the objectives from you, one of its Sorcerer Kings, I think we're a bit of a slower army, mostly because we need to get rituals up and going. We need to get in the units. I've been taking the Mahut with the favorite Hormus on it, which means that I'm not getting one of my caster characters until turn 3, so I need more time to get things going. But once I do, I'm pretty good at getting to something and hitting with an equal amount of look and coming out on top of that, mostly because we have a lot of attacks. When I think of just Wadrun in general, I'm thinking now other dinosaurs, not necessarily Raptor Rider dinosaurs, but if I'm bringing, a Thunder Chieftain, I'm taking a Triceratops Pax. Those are really good for blasting anyone off of whatever they're standing on, short of, they stop all your impact or anything like that. And even then, they got trample. Not huge amounts of trample, but you got a little bit of that at the end. I found quite a bit of success with that with my Mahut. Just that little bit extra at the end can a lot of times, depending on what I'm going at, be enough to take you out. I'm thinking Spires in this when you're talking more of the avatar list. Center avatar, running my Lineage Highborn in just the base avatar unit type things. The big brutish monster list that they do. Thinking maybe even Siegebreaker Behemoth, because he's just hitting you with smite. Oh, do you not have evade? Then you don't get anything. Most people, you're not necessarily holding out because of the good evade. On certain factions, of course, you're holding out because I got great armor and great this, that, the other thing, and good resolve. He's got the good terrifying and he has smite. You're not getting any of those rules. So if you don't have evade, he's just trucking you anyway. Old Dominion, I put them as takers. I went back and forth. It depends on what type of list you run. Like I said, for holding or even pushing, Fallen Divinity, she does that job because she comes in like a light, so she can be sitting on the objective early and things like that. But Old Dominion, I put them here because, one, they tend to be a bit slower, and rules-wise, we don't have all the extra buffs and powers until a little bit later in the game. Even with the Fallen Divinity, she's decent at tier 1. She is nigh unstoppable at tier 3, but you need time to be able to do that. There is good ways to get that a little bit faster. Dark Cenotaphs, bringing statues that get destroyed, given the 2 tokens instead of 1, all of that. But I find that they're not just taking it because they're good at destroying you, or hitting into someone. They're taking it because you probably just got there first, because we're just slow. Our units that, maybe I want to set on objectives other than Legionnaires just aren't coming in for a while. Varangian Guard, starting turn 3 in their 5 move. In this one, they're not reaching that for the turn after, so they're not even getting until at least turn 4. Unless maybe you got a really good reinforcement line. Even then, I'll tell you right now, that's super tough to make that distance. I've had plenty of times where I'm not making it. Dwag were the ones I was back and forth on. So, pre-changes or a while back, I would say, okay, they're really good at holding. But I find in general, they took quite a bit of that away. Dwag are lacking a lot of where they used to be absolutely insane resolve, like resolve 5s, or like defense 4s with Harden and all this stuff. They kind of sit more at the 3 defense, 4 resolve sort of level. They're not necessarily, they can push if you're running, some of your lights, because they do have, some good Flame Berserker type stuff. Or they could take if you're running, some of your bigger monsters or, Dragon Slayer type units, all of those. But they kind of, there's a reason why Dwag are currently sort of sitting at the bottom, because their identity isn't quite working right now. Their identity kind of fits this idea of we stop, or what I would say, what it should be is, you have a thing, we don't let you do it. But I don't think they quite do that enough right now. So they're sort of the wild card. I don't know exactly where I'd want to put them. Now again, whatever you're running could absolutely change this. But I do think some factions are a little bit better at ones than others. I think Nords are much better at getting to the objectives early than they are at surviving there. Not great armor, things like that. Same thing, Old Dominion. I think they're really good at being there late game. That is what they're good at. You might not have a lot of units, but the units I have are very strong. And by that point, I've probably devoured a bunch of your units. So, depending on the faction that you are playing or playing against, depends on what you need to do in that moment. If you're going to sit there and play against Nords, like I did, and we'll talk about that shortly, if you're going to play against Nords, if I just let you score a bunch early, it might be too late. Even if I'm not taking it, I have to at least stop you from having it. And that can be tough, but very meaningful to do. A layered approach versus spreading out. So, again, this always depends on the mission, but when I look at this, if I'm looking at, say, objective zones, am I confident just throwing like a unit to each of these to do that? Am I going to want to, say, if I have a mission, let's find one here. Say a mission like this where I have a nice objective zone closer to me, especially one that is worth more points to the opponent. If I have this objective zone set nice and close to me, I want a not light unit, I should say that, a lighter unit. So my little 3-pack of random guys who are there to maybe grab me some objectives or not really necessarily do much. There's not much else for them to do. They're going to get here, but they're probably going to stay somewhat near the back because I'm going to leapfrog them with someone. I'm going to leapfrog them with someone who wants to either stand at the front or push forward. You know, your 3-pack of normal infantry don't want to actually have to defend it because they're probably not great at defending it. What they want to do is be able to hold it and have someone else go do the fighting for them. I'm looking, at... I'll use, Old Dominion for the example there. I'm looking at Legionnaires standing there, but the Legionnaires don't want to stay in the front because they're probably not going to survive the good hits that you might do into them. They'd rather stand a little bit back and have just about anything else leapfrog them. So carefully, some Varangian Guard, Anatheti, whatever it is, leapfrog, go in front. There's other times where, especially in some of these missions, I have a lot of objectives. So... scrolling just to find one of the good ones that does it. Here we go. There's a bunch of them. But even this, declined flank, you're looking at 6 markers. If I try to overload in a spot, you could spread out and do it. So I'm probably going to have to try to spread to at least 3 of these. I do think there's something to say in list building that, assuming you don't know what mission you're going into, assuming you don't know what your opponent is going to be, or you're just making an all-comers list, then even if I know I'm playing blank and this is the army they play, I'm still just putting my list together and we're going to see. But I try to play on all my lists to be able to grab reasonably well 3 objectives and take down a marker. If there's multiple markers, then I can send more stuff at it. But because a lot of these missions have 3 to 6 objectives, I want to have at least a couple like these smaller little 3-packs. I want to have at least one big unit, if I can, or one stronger unit that can withstand some hits. Because if I'm positioned in such a way where, really to make this work, I have to be rushing at them the whole time. Let's take, for instance, 100 Kingdoms Cav. 100 Kingdoms Cav is, in general, going to struggle, I think, a little bit more with something like this, because they don't really want to sit on this objective. Sitting on it means my Cav is really doing nothing. I put a lot of points, put a minimum 240 points into, maybe, I know some are cheaper, but let's say, 240 points in that unit, maybe more, because I'm not necessarily taking a little 3-pack, maybe I took a 4-pack of whatever Cav it is, just for them to hang out in the back? No, I need to get them charging, especially if it's a Cav unit like Ash and Dawn that really do their work on the charge, not on the hit. Which means, because if I let you hit me, now I'm in trouble. So I'm not going to want to stay on that. I'm going to maybe want to push onto your objectives. But again, you have your own plans against me. So certain armies like that, they might not want to see a mission like this, because maybe I can position well. If I can double up on these, put a unit towards the front, another unit towards the back, I'll let you go fight the unit in front. I'll position so you can't get on the objective enough. I'll score it. Then when you finally defeat them, I'm going to push into you. And if you're a unit that really wants that charge, if I've been able to do this correctly, you didn't get it. I got into you, and that makes all the world of difference. I fought against, Cav type units quite a bit before, and I've run them quite a bit before. Other units matter as well. Monsters care about this a lot as well. If you're a super monster heavy list, you're great at grabbing the objective you're on. You're spending a lot of points, so you can really only get certain ones. I like to have at least 1 3-pack of my cheap mediums. My 100, 120 point medium unit, if I have it, and their goal is to sit on an objective if there's one near the back, and that's it. And if they do nothing else, they're earning me points. So, got a little bit away from that layered versus spread out. That really depends on the mission and your opponent. When I'm taking a look at this, I am looking at what they are doing, but I usually do try to layer a little bit more rather than purely spread out, because if things aren't supported at all, unless it's a really good unit or your opponent really makes some bad mistakes or they really misaligned things, you're not going to be able to keep it anyway. All right, so let's take a look at the next bit. Is don't overextend your battle lines. So in say a mission like this, because this is a good one to kind of highlight this idea. No objective markers to destroy. Sure, who cares? Even if there is, that's a problem. What I've watched sometimes that people do, and I try to avoid this myself, but sometimes what people do is they push forward a unit and they'll say, oh, you know what? I'll go take your spot from you. And they have this unit that's way up here, and there's really nothing else within 12 inches of it, even potentially further back. Yeah, maybe you stop me from scoring a little bit, and that could matter. But if that unit's out there on their own, and assuming they're not super crazy survivable, let's assume that we're both smart people, that if you push a unit here, I'm going to put something forward that can take it down. Well, now you might be at action disadvantage, point disadvantage, and I took it from you anyway. I played games before where someone pushes, say their light gets kind of far, my hook comes in, and I trample it down. You probably saved about 2 points, which depending on the mission, on a mission like this, isn't necessarily really worth it. You lost your unit, and that charge piece got me into a good spot where now I can attack wherever else I want. So, certain factions do this better. Nords do this quite well, but most of those Nords lists, at least the ones that I play against and the ones I see more often, they're not running like one light to go at one spot. They're running a couple. So they're not necessarily overstaying their battle line because they have multiple coming in. Now I'm having to worry about or pull against multiples. If they're putting one far end and one another on the other far end, now, okay, do I just go one side and try to take it out and overflow, or do I have to contend against a little bit of both because now I'm being forced to split my forces? Now they're getting a little bit more of their say, especially if they have, a moving charging unit coming in later kind of thing. So be careful about sending like that one lone thing forward. Or, because keep in mind, this game, you come in piecemeal. Don't piecemeal your army into your opponent. Don't just push, oh, man, it's like turn 3. I gotta be scoring points. I gotta shove forward. Let's take a look. Head to head. I can't let you get A. So I'd like to layer some units in front of there. I'd like to grab this 9-inch as well over here in this head-to-head scenario. But if you have it, and I'm only getting 1 or 2 units in, I don't want to send just one unit forward if you have more army that can take that down, and then I send another one forward and another one. I'd rather let you have it for 1 or 2 turns to build up enough force to be able to take it from you, or at least stop you from scoring it. I've watched a lot of people where they get so obsessed with, I need this spot, I need the points now, and whatever happens to my unit, who cares? It's a 10-turn game. Did you need to throw away your unit on turn 3? You put your unit up there in turn 3, you knew I was close, I charged into you because you're a lighter thing, took you down, and now you're down a unit, and I'm in a good position. Did that do you much? Even in some of these faster armies when I play them, I'll let you have the round if it's better to let you have it than try to do something about it. Sometimes it's better to hold back, to actually get a force ready. When my big monster comes in, the turn he comes in, he's not doing anything anyway. He doesn't need to go push to necessarily go sit on something that then is going to get him destroyed. My monster comes in, he's able to clip this 9. And he clipped it, now you're not scoring it because it's 3v3. But you have a cav unit off to the side. And that cav unit now can hit him, and he's probably gone. Then he did nothing. Stopping you from scoring 2 or 3 points is effectively nothing in a 10-turn game. Sorry, 10-turn game. So don't push in the wrong spots. Try to get your opponent to overextend or oversell what they're doing. Stack up a little bit. Maybe if on a mission say this, maybe I don't stack nearly as much here. Maybe I push a little bit more for the 9, but my goal is to then pull across. So I'm not worried about scoring this much tastier objective early. I'm thinking turn, 7 is where I want to get there. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to score this on my way through, dealing with this, and I'm going to put enough stuff in your way that'll take you a while to get here. And then maybe one big thing late game will come in to kind of clear that up. So make your opponent make errors, make them play not the way that you want them to, or not the way they want to, maybe is the best way to put that. Last point is to push for those neutral or / enemy markers, your other markers. Like I said, in a lot of these missions, if they have objective markers, those can be the points that sway it. And a lot of these, when they have those markers, they tend to be worth more than individual zones. And it's much easier to tie on a zone. So if we're looking at some of these missions, let me take a look. Let me pull up one. Here we go. I will pull up Echelon. Echelon has 1 friendly for each of us and 2 neutrals. And then the 2 9s. Getting one of those neutrals is super, super important. Getting at least one of them, so that way I can get one and essentially maybe yours as well. But if I can get the neutrals, the other ones are pretty far back. Our friendly ones are pretty far back. Maybe neither of us actually get to those. So if I can get at least one of the neutrals, I can keep pace. If I can somehow get to both of them before you get to them, now I'm currently winning. Because one objective zone is much more likely for me to be able to get some points out of. One is much more likely for you. If the game is not going lopsided, if you're going to lose 90-10, it didn't matter what you did. But if the game is not that lopsided, it's pretty likely that we're within about a score of each other on these two. That maybe one round I score 1, you scored 1. In the following round, you can test to be enough, and then you scored this one. But we're still pretty close, which means that these objective markers are going to be very important. I've absolutely lost games because my opponent destroyed some of those objective markers that I could have taken out. And then that was the determining factor. So objective zones are important, but objective zones have visual importance. It is sitting there on the board. It's this big spot to go stand on. Objective markers don't always seem as impressive because overall you cannot score as much. If the objective marker is worth, say, 3 points, but the zones are worth a lot, over a 10-turn game, you can get a lot more from the zones. But in a lot of them where that happens, the equality between those zones is pretty even. Again, assuming you're just not getting blown out of the water against your opponent. So getting that extra 4 points can make the difference. The same way as if it's a mission that gives you points for regiments, characters, and warlords. If I destroy the warlord's regiment, I get a lot of points from that. So, the zones, we're going to be pretty even on that for quite a while. I'm going to go hunt down your warlord. Because if I can take that down, that's potentially, say, a 6-point swing. That could be 2 turns worth of scoring off of the way that we're scoring currently. Because if we're essentially staying neck and neck, and every now and then you stop me on one, and I stop you on one, 6 points could actually be multiple turns. That's my little bit of thoughts of how to succeed all missions. What I want to do now, rather than go through all these missions, I want to talk just about 2 of them. One of the missions I want to talk about was the scenario contest winner. and that is break their lines, because we went and played this. Like I said, we played this at our most recent tournament, so we get a bunch of players into it, and I could ask for some feedback on this. In case you haven't seen this one, I am going to discuss this scenario. So this is the one that made us realize we needed to make more objective markers, which is why I made 4 of them over there. I'm going to have to make more as well, because this submission takes 6. And we didn't want to just use some bases. We want to use some nice markers. So we had to have quite a few of these. We have like 30 plus markers. There's 2 6-inch zones, a 9-inch zone, and 3 markers that are friendly to me, 3 markers that are friendly to you. Let's assume I'm player 1 down here at the bottom. So my A's are friendly, B's are enemy. They give you a little bit of outscoring here. So when you go to victory phase, normally it's supremacy phase, or essentially in that phase, the top of the turn is we're going to determine your reinforcement line. You do it at the end of turn. You take a look at your reinforcement line. And if your reinforcement line is in front of any of your markers, gain a point for each one. So that means if your reinforcement line is up to the half of the board and all 3 of these still exist, then you're gaining 3 points a turn on that. You're also going to gain some points for grabbing objective zones. So as it says, you're getting 3 for taking out an enemy marker. 2 for taking out a marker. 3 for the 9-inch, 2 for the 2 inches, 2 if you got rid of the warlord, and 1 for every friendly objective marker that your reinforcement line is in front of. We found this mission very, very interesting. I can see overall, I don't know the missions. If anyone else did scenarios for the contest, if you want, I would love to talk about them, look at them, anything like that. I'm really interested in what people came up with. But I can see overall, I think some good reasons why this one won. One, you have your objective zones, nice and equal amongst it, but it does something that the game naturally doesn't do. This is rewarding you based off of where you're actually pushing. Sometimes we push the reinforcement line because we want to use it. Otherwise, we don't necessarily care. Personally, me, like I said, I don't bring a lot of lights. And notice, lights push the reinforcement line, which means that a light unit up to the middle could be helping me actually score, where normally lights don't usually let me score. So here's a way for lights to be useful in scoring. Oddly enough, when I played this in round 1 versus my friend George, who runs a Nord's list, who runs a good amount of lights, and I don't remember the exact end score. I want to say he won by like 20 some points or something, but he was able to push like starting turn 2 when he starts to score to get these constantly. And then he threw enough stuff in the front that I couldn't stop it. He was able to set on his 6. I was able to get towards mine. The 9 we went back and forth on, but he pushed forward enough with a unit, because remember, it's based off reinforcement line. So if your opponent is somewhere, they're stopping it. He was able to stop mine enough, but always have his. So he's able to rack up, 20 some points on that alone, not even counting he destroyed, I think, one of my objectives and all of that. Notice also in this mission, we talked about, pushing for destroying markers. If I take out, say, this forward B marker, now, not only did I gain 2 points, I stopped you from 1 point a turn if things are going your way. So it's really important, this one, to push for these. These zones are helpful. You want the zones, but if you destroy the markers, you're really going to lower what your opponent can do. And if you can keep them out of your backfield, you have a good shot at taking the 6-inch. You have a good shot at taking all 3 of these, and you have a fair shot at the 9. What was interesting, this mission, at least the way we played it, really helped Dweg, because unlike other people whose reinforcement lines get knocked back by units, Dwegs don't. Which means if the furthest forward Dweg unit is past the most forward B, then they're always scoring it. And that's the way we're playing it. I think Dweg need a little bit of help anyway right now, so that was absolutely fine. I do see if Dweg get a super strong rewrite, how this one could really imbalance. Although I will say, even if we call this a tournament scenario, they don't have to be perfectly balanced. They really don't. They have to be reasonable. It has to be able to look at it and say, yeah, based off what I did, I have a fair shake at this. Or, oh, my list makes it tough for me. I didn't take lights. That put me at a disadvantage for this particular scenario. Maybe that's on me. Maybe I need to take some lights, if nothing more, not necessarily because of this scenario, but because of what lights can do for me and things like this. But yeah, it gave one army an advantage depending on the sorts of things they brought. You don't like what it does? Go destroy their markers. Go try to do something about it kind of feel. Like I said, I always try to bring at least a couple 3-packs lose at least one, maybe another. I'm probably going to try to start working a little bit more lights. And other than that, obviously I'm taking some heavies. If there's objective markers, they're trying to aim towards that while they make into the enemy as well, and all that. Other one I want to talk about, this one is not nearly as professionally done, is the one that I wrote. So this was my entry, and I'll talk about the change I did in this off of what they commented back to me. But I did 2 9-inch zones, 2 6-inch zones. You'll notice the 9 inches are along the lines, 6 inches off the edge, and 4 objective markers. The ones in your table half are friendly to you. The ones in the enemy half are friendly to them. Something I noticed, I didn't realize there was another mission called Divide and Conquer when I named it. I just thought that was a cool name, and I realized there was one later after I submitted it. My thought on this particular mission was the idea that I wanted to play with something this game naturally doesn't do. When I think about old 40K or fantasy, somewhat fantasy or some of these other ones, is the idea of table quarters. Taking area control occurs in this game, but occurs in small isolated pockets. It's this small objective zone. We don't actually worry about board presence otherwise. I wanted a mission that cared about board presence. So what I said is, hey, we divide this up into 4 quarters. And for every stand you have in a quarter, that is counting 1 towards seizing the quarter. They can test with standard rules as well. The alteration was the idea that light stands don't count quite as much, because the comment given to me was lights could overwhelm this then. So I made it, if you play First Blood, takes 2 lights to count as 1. Did the same thing here, 2 light stands. Notice it's stands, not regiments. And the stand has to be fully in. So if you have a 3-pack going right up the middle, they'll have 1 stand in one quarter, 1 stand in the other corner, so they can count in both, but the middle stand won't count anywhere. You can't score a quarter, though, if it has an enemy objective marker in it. So that means the 2 quarters on my enemy zones, or enemy's half of the board, I can't do anything about until I destroy those objective markers, and I put them within 12 inches of each other, nice and close. I said, what I wanted this mission to do was something different. I wanted to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to reward you just for having stands. I'm going to reward you for your field position. I put those 2 6 inches along the line because the question is, do you try hard to take the 6 inch, which means you're a little bit worse at quarters? Do you kind of go into the 6 inch in a little bit of weird shape? All of that. The comment from players for this particular one was just that the objective markers should probably be swapped in, so the 9 inches might move out and the objective markers move a little bit closer to the midline, so that way you're a little bit more incentivized to destroy them. You essentially want people to want to take the quarters. And if I want to take your quarters, I have to destroy your marker. So kind of putting it out to the edge makes it a little bit harder than to go and sit and grab these objective zones. That was sort of the feel that some people had. Because you notice, getting table quarters are worth a point, getting 2 or more are with 2 additional points, and destroying those objective markers are worth 3 points. So it's really trying to, and if you did notice here, objective zones are only worth a point, 2 extra points if you're 2 or more. So I tried to de-emphasize the zones. They still matter. If I let my opponent have all 4 of them, I'm in trouble. But getting the quarters becomes very important. And if I destroy your objective zones, that's as good as letting you get several objectives. So that was sort of my take on that. What I liked about the particular mission that I wrote, not to sit here and toot my own horn about it. You, in the comments, tell me if you think it's garbage. I don't care. That's absolutely fine. Hopefully be constructive about it. Tell me what you might change. What I liked about it is it tried to emphasize something different. A lot of their missions vary up the sorts of things that they do well and what sort of armies do well. If we're thinking a 3-round tournament, then what I want to have happen is I want it to end up being that I have certain missions that feel good for me, certain missions that maybe don't feel good for me, and did I build a list that can handle that? I said, for most of these, I want units that are fine just sitting somewhere, grabbing me points. If everything in the army is expensive, then it might feel like a waste for someone to sit on a backfield objective. But that actually wins the game. You actually win by objectives, which means I need to be okay with someone sitting back and grabbing it. So I try to take at least a cheap unit that can score. I try to take some harassing type units that at least a unit that I don't mind throwing away. Let's face it, this is a war game. You are going to have to put, models into the meat grinder. So if, using that cav again as an example, which of that cav block, if you're running like an all cav 100 Canis Bliss, are you putting into the meat grinder? Which one are you okay with your opponent just chewing into? I'm not saying that you're not going to do damage back, but I probably don't want to just go stick them somewhere as a prevention tool. Where other factions you have a bit more of that. 3-pack of Avatara, I can put them forward. They're pretty good survivable. They'll fight their way through. And if they end up going down, I have some stuff to follow up with. Maybe I have some shooting where I can be plinking into you while they're standing there, kind of thing. I try to make sure, I always tend to make monsters. If I have an auto objective destruction method, I make sure I have accessible, and I keep it in mind of where I place it, so that way I can just try to take that out if I can. And it's especially important to me to figure out if my opponent does have one. Say with Sorcerer Kings, we can do it with a particular ritual within 8 inches. So if you're playing against us, have we started that ritual? How close are we? And it has to be a character close enough. Have I met those conditions? If I am, okay, the objective's probably gone. If not, if I'm getting close to it, can you take it out ahead of time? Can you get to my characters to keep them outside of that 8? Those sort of thoughts. Archangel, okay, it needs to be within 12 to do that. Sometimes that's a good idea for sometimes not. But essentially, it's a charge move that it does. Right? It's a straightforward move. It's not exactly a charge, but for all intents and purposes, kind of like that. I think the movement is a little bit different, but essentially a 12-inch move. Let's put it that way. 12-inch straight move, I should say. All right. Well, if I'm just in your way, then you don't get it. Okay, you'll hit me. I take some smite hits on that one. But if I have a decent evade, I don't care. Or even if I do, well, maybe it stops you from getting the points that you really needed right then, because maybe this mission doesn't reward destruction of regiments. So take down my regiment, who cares? I approach missions in both the list building stage and then also when I'm at the table. I want to know what special things my opponent can do. Can their lights score? It's always a question I ask. Do your lights score, or do they have a way to score? Some of them have it on the charge, they count as scoring, or whatever other tools. Can your lights do anything special? Do you have any ways to auto-destroy objective markers? And I'll tell you the same, because I don't like gotchas. So if I can do any of these things, you will absolutely know it, because I will flat out tell you, oh yeah, here's the, I said when I play my Sorcerer Kings, because now everyone realizes all the rituals. Because if there's not an objective zone, that ritual is garbage. I would never use it. So you might not have noticed that. So I'll always let you know, yeah, here's something I can do. Here's the people that can get it going, kind of thing. So I've done some episodes, I think, before in list building. I think the detailed discussion about mission related to list building is a separate thing entirely. All right, I paused there for a second. I think a pure discussion on list building for mission and stuff like that is a list building episode, not necessarily a missions episode. But be smart when you build your lists. Think about the sorts of missions that are out there. Can you effectively sit on 3 to 6 objectives? You don't necessarily have to get on to 6, but if you're putting it like, oh man, with the way I built this, I would say the average you see is probably 8 regiments? Maybe more, but you don't really see under 8. If you're only like 6 regiments, well, if I take out 1 or 2 of those, you're going to really struggle to go grab objective zones. And then if you just want to sit on points, that's fine with me. You ain't got nothing else left to fight me with. So do I have enough regiments to be able to do that with? Do I have special rules that help me with any of this? Do I have scoring lights? If so, I'm bringing them. All those sort of thoughts. So hopefully through this gave you some ideas about a good way to approach missions, or at least a way to think about them in general. Keep in mind, you have to think about it at the list building stage, at deployment stage, throughout the game, and what your opponent can do. Be aware, like I said, we talked about some of those types. Are they better at pushing forward? Are they fine with letting me stand there because they're going to hit me back so hard they're just going to destroy my units? And keep in mind what amount is going to be scored here. If there's a lot of points to be scored, I'm not going to win in turn 3 or turn 4. I can wait till turn 8 to really start to turn it on then. So I'm only going to throw something away into you if that helps me guarantee that win. If we're looking at that mission where I'm only scoring like maybe up to 40 some points, if I can stop you from getting 5 points by throwing a unit away, now it's worth it. If you can score like 90 some points, I don't want to throw that unit away to stop you from scoring a few points. Even 5 might be tough unless I'm scoring a bunch as well. So just keep those sort of things in mind. All right, you should be seeing this probably at some point on Wednesday, which is actually my birthday. And as a nice gift to myself, like the video or subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Or I guess your gift to me, not really to myself. My gift to myself is, I don't know, just recording more stuff because I like to. Keep in mind, we do have that discount code. It's Terrain Kickers as the show notes below. Saves you 10%, say like for the new year only coming out, which I am going to be taking some stuff up for. They'd be interesting in terms of missions because they can run a lot of 2-packs, but they're very expensive. So, I don't know. I kind of built some lists in there. I'm hoping to try to test them out with some proxy stuff this weekend. I don't know for sure if I'll be able to, but that's my goal. For other things you'll be seeing, I'm currently editing my Learn to Play video. I'm also making some Trench Crusade videos. And I have one more video currently from Dan related to Battletech, but he's a big Battletech guy, so he's going to be doing some more stuff with that. And we'll be having some more Battletech stuff coming out in the future as well. For the Trench Crusade video, it's going to be, the next one I have planned is related to the math of Trench Crusade, especially since there's a lot of probabilities in that game. And I've listened or seen or heard a lot of people having really odd ideas about what they think can happen or the amount of dice they have to throw at things to make it happen. So the point of it is not to teach you, probability perfectly, but to give you enough of an impression that you have some confidence about what you should maybe try and do if you're thinking numbers wise. And as a numbers man myself, I'm always thinking numbers wise. All right, well, that'll do it for us tonight then. On behalf of everyone here at the show, has a good hobbying. It's a great gaming.